Thank you very much. This is absolutely a pleasure, and thank you for everyone for putting in this together. I don't think I've ever done this in my life, but for today, I'll pretend I'm just a pro at it. Today's talk is actually about backstage stories of accepts, rejects, deliberations, and inspirations. Let me start by saying that I'm absolutely honored, privileged, humbled by this award. This is a fantastic community, a fantastic audience, and I join very, very strong researchers in this Rockstar Award. So I absolutely want to thank the community. I absolutely feel like this, truly. But also, this front stage is really a part of the entire story. It's the pot and the weed and the alcohol and the women in the backstage. That's also part of this entire story. So I also feel that unless I talk about the backstage and people that are involved, people that actually make these things happen, unless I talk about that, it's not complete, and I feel compelled to tell you a little bit more about that. So this talk is going to be about the backstage stories of what goes on or what went on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in time, roll back in time, and start looking at from high school days. I'm going to quickly tell you stories here and there. They're not a journey or anything. They're not lessons at all. They're just incoherent stories that are put together that should be kind of, hopefully, some amount of fun, but some amount of reflection and some amount of deliberations. And if I sometimes sound immodest, that's because I am immodest, okay? I'm not trying to be modest. My wife often says, "Don't be so modest, you're not that good." And that's a quote from Golda Meir, and I really like that quote. I'm not in a position to be modest. I'm really trying to say I am good, and I'm trying to say I am proud of some things. So please try to give me that leeway, grant me that measure of immodesty, and I'll tell you a few stories that went on in backstage. Okay, so let me start with high school. I was actually aspiring to become a ping pong player. And I truly mean it. You may not believe, but here is a video of it, that I was actually playing 8 to 10 hours a day. I was practicing. I was actually playing very well. I started winning all my local competitions, the school competitions, my district competition, and I started actually going into the professional circuit around in the interstate levels in India. And at that point, this idiot, no, this guy's a really good guy. So he actually beat me in the quarterfinals, black and blue. And there was a real heartbreak. I came home crying, and then I started reflecting, what did I do wrong? I struggled so much. I practiced, I rehearsed. I had developed myself into a pretty well-rounded ping pong player. And then as years passed by, I've reflected on this, and what I realized was this guy, he was comparable to me in most of his shots, the forehands and the backhands. But there was one shot that he had perfected, and he was really, really good at it. And everything I tried to do with him, he would move on the side and play that shot, and I would just not be able to defend it. So he had kind of put all his eggs in one basket in that one shot. And I was a well-rounded player, and actually I lost it, and he went to become a very good national India-level table tennis, ping pong player years after that. But anyway, so with that loss had multiple ramifications. I was in a position close to college that I said, okay, ping pong player, college. I said, no, I don't have it in me. I actually picked college. So I went to an institute called Haldi Institute of Technology in computer science. I did my undergrad in computer science. It was a new, young institute, and time just flew by. I dabbled with all kinds of things. I was actually very inspired by Bob Dylan at that point in time. And I started writing songs and composing songs, and believe it or not, I was actually a self-taught rhythm guitarist in my college band. And we played around the college. We went to other colleges to jam together. It was actually a lot of fun, except that 3 years just flew by, and suddenly I was a senior, and someone asked, so where are you going for an internship? Like, what? What internship? And then I really started thinking that I had no clue of where life is taking me. And really, I felt like that. So I started like looking for what I want to do. And then one lucky day, I really stumbled upon a person called Shomprakash Bandyopadhyay. He's a faculty from IIT Bombay. And he actually introduced me. I literally stumbled upon him in the sense that I was knocking at the doors of different companies to see if there was an internship that I could get. And this guy was actually walking up the stairs. I didn't know him. And he said, here's this guy who's having a tiff with the security because I wanted to go and talk to people. And he said, okay, why don't you come along with me? And he introduced me to what the notion of mobile ad hoc networks. And I actually worked with him for the entire final year of my undergraduate. And I worked on information percolation. Here's a simulation that I did as a part of my undergraduate thesis, where it essentially talks about mobile delay-tolerant networks and how information percolates through the network and actually does broadcast, and I tried to prove something. It was a very exciting journey, and we actually submitted a paper in MobiHawk, IEEE MobiHawk 2000. That was in Boston, Massachusetts. That was, I think, the first year of MobiHawk, and our paper got published. It was called A Distributed Mechanism for Topology Discovery in Wireless Networks Using Mobile Agents. And guess who the program chair of that year was? Nitin Vaidya was the program chair, and he was one of the ones who actually accepted the paper, and that was my ticket to PhD. Okay. I was really excited that I got a chance to work with him, and I flew in 1st of January 2001. That was the new millennia. Illinois was a whole new world. Nitin was totally sharp and very articulate and totally energetic. P.R. Kumar had just published the Capacity of Wireless Network paper at that point. Jennifer Howe, who's passed away, and I really miss her, she was doing fantastic work. Robin was bubbling with ideas, and she was much younger then. And they were all my students. I'm kidding. And they were all the students that I lived with, that were my roommates, batchmates. They're all really sharp, and I was like, where am I? And if you'll notice that guy at the end, Thyaga Nandagopal, he was actually about to graduate at that point, and he spent 3 hours with me telling me the ropes of PhD, what courses to take, what not to take, and so on. And I feel grateful he spent that 3 hours with me that day. So then as I started working on PhD, what I started looking at is directional antennas, smart antennas for medium access control and the other network stack. So the key idea was perceiving was, all our laptops and all our devices at that point had these omnidirectional antennas, which are like dumb antennas, which send energy in all directions when you make a transmission. And I was trying to say, look, if you actually made these antennas directional, like a flashlight, then the energy actually goes only towards your receiver, and thereby you're able to enable spatial reuse or parallelism in the network, which would improve the throughput of the system. Turns out it's not that easy, because the entire software stack makes implicit assumptions about the hardware, about the antenna, so you have to actually go and redesign and make changes to the entire stack. I started playing with some antennas, started playing with software on some of these antennas, the drivers, and we kind of sent our first paper to MobiCom 2002. I was waiting for the results, and Nitin called up from the PC meeting and said, hey, your paper is in, it barely made it. And I'm like, if he's so happy, I'm going to be really happy about it. So I was really happy that the paper got accepted to MobiCom 2002, and I had no idea about the community at that point. It was medium access control in ad hoc networks using directional antennas. And I come to the community, and I'm, wow, right? 2002, I don't know how many of you remember, was in Atlanta, and there were the stalwarts in the community: Hari, Deborah, Randy, Anthony, Vaduvur, Victor, Edward, Dave, Charlie. There are many, many others that I've not been able to include. They were all around me, and I gave a talk, and they asked questions, and man, this is a real place. This is where the real stuff happens. In fact, I went to dinner with Victor, and I sat next to Victor, and I was like, this is Victor Ball, and I'm sitting next to him. Man, I feel like a rock star at that point. Well, I continued working on directional antennas. I remember coining that word deafness, because we were looking at how directional antennas, when S points its beam to D, other people cannot talk to S, because S is essentially has filtered out everything. It's like a spatial filter. And I started working on this notion of deafness. I also looked at routing with directional antennas, how if you had directional antennas, can you come up with new routes that would otherwise not be possible with omnidirectional antennas. And my PhD kind of ended around 2006. And at the end, I kind of looked back, and I thought, overall, I had some regrets at the end of PhD. I did not build a great system. I did not prove a great theorem. And I don't think I touched anybody's life. And maybe perhaps the only thing I took away was that I kind of learned how to do research in a reasonable way. And that kind of left a hole in me, left a dissatisfaction in me that I need to really do something that's tangible, that's tangibly a contribution. But anyway, I was really interested in actually going to academia. So I applied to many schools, many schools, okay? So many schools that I actually wrote up a Perl script which would generate a cover letter for a given school based on the inputs that I would give it, okay? So it generated cover letters to the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, to Duke University. I hereby submit my application, and it created, I think, around 50 applications. This was the first slide of my talk for my faculty job talk, and I think I got quite a few interviews and I gave quite a few talks. And Duke gave me a job, believe it or not. They said they'll give me a salary. And that was fantastic. I was really excited about it, but there's also another university that I was debating between Duke and that university, and someone from that university said, he was trying to convince me that Duke's tenure is hard. So he said, Duke is like a celebrity girlfriend. She's going to hang out with you, but not going to marry you. So I like celebrity girlfriends. That night I actually accepted Duke, and I felt like a rock star that day. That yes, I have a celebrity girlfriend that I can hang out with. Who cares about marriage? Just edit that part of the video because my wife might actually see that. I joined Duke as an assistant professor. And man, that was another very humbling experience. I totally felt like an imposter, right? There were fantastic people around me. I had to teach, I had to write grants, I had to write papers, and there were students whose careers were kind of dependent on me, although I later realized it doesn't matter at all. But anyway, at that point I felt it does depend on me. I felt totally like an imposter. I felt like this kid. And in that nervousness, I thought that maybe I should go around talking to people. I started giving talks at different places. I started talking to people and said, do you want to collaborate on these things? I started talking about what are the new problems, what are the new important ideas. And I've seen a lot of junior faculty, people who just go there, they feel nervous and they tend to do this, and I was very much doing this. I was going to conferences and trying to ask questions. I was trying to find out what to work on from the community, from other people. Until Nitin one day called up and said, hey, people tell me you're everywhere. What are you doing? And I tell him, I'm doing this, I'm trying to think of this. All that's crap. The way Nitin talks, come on, all that's crap, right? So I said, yeah, maybe he's right. Maybe all that I'm saying are kind of rehashes of what other people are saying. So I said, you know what? This is not going to work. I really shut my door. I shut my office door. I forgot about work-life balance. I just focused on trying to come up something that felt original, that I was excited about, as opposed to trying to find sap and juice from other people. So I thought a lot, and at that point in time, sensor networks were still big. This was around 2006, 2007. And I was thinking about sensor networks, and then someone actually mentioned that there's a phone from Nokia that has sensors on them. So I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of a new wave. And I thought, with all these sensor network stuff that were happening, and if these phones have sensors on them, how about the stuff that you do with modes, which is environment monitoring, nature monitoring, etc.? How about you just move it to humans, right? And then I kind of started thinking about this vision where, you have this information microscope. The vision was someone sits in the cloud with this virtual information microscope that looks at the world, and the phones are like small lenses in people's pockets that actually sense the person, sense the context, sense the environment around the person, and pulls up all this information on the internet, aggregates them, and kind of, the metaphor is like an information microscope. And I kind of named that paper Microblog, thinking that these are small sensory blogs coming from people. I felt it was interesting, and I could actually talk about it to people around me as opposed to directional antennas. So I got excited and I said, okay, let's build this system. And we actually demoed the system in Census in Australia, and many people liked it. In fact, Nitin for the first time showed excitement to anything that I had to say. He called Victor and he called a program manager and said, hey, have you seen this? Suman came, Tyaga came, a lot of people came, and as they kind of said things and did things, these blogs actually went in and sat on these, sat actually in real time, kind of came and got posted on that system. Victor said, wow, what are you doing with this? How are you going to run with this? Do you have long-term plans? I said, no, I'm just having fun with this. But at that point, I got the feedback that maybe this is interesting, and I submitted the paper to MobiSys 2008, and the paper actually got accepted. I was really, really happy, and this is how I felt. I really felt, yeah, this time this was my idea, and Nitin did not help me, right? It was running live with real users, and believe it or not, Professor Gaetano Borriello emailed me for the paper. He said, hey, can I have your paper? That's the first time anyone has done that except my advisor. And I was like, wow. And I really miss Gaetano, actually. I mean, he was such a mentor at that point. Suman actually emailed me and said, hey, your paper title looks very interesting. I would really like to actually learn more about it. And I really, really felt I aligned with this. So with that, I started thinking about other problems. In fact, microblog was hardly a research paper. It was kind of a sketch of a broad vision that was like, okay, people are going to use phones and sensors. But it's hardly research, but I was feeling good. So I started thinking about localization, and I started looking at radar and all these RF, Horus, all these wireless localization papers. And this is the kind of picture that came to my mind, that if you can fingerprint it correctly, you can say where it is. But I think someone in one of these conferences said, but you have to basically, the advertisement industry, the real industry doesn't care about your physical coordinate. They care about whether you're in the Pizza Hut or the Radio Shack or the Starbucks. They care about what is a logical location, not a physical coordinate. So I started thinking about, whoa, that's a hard problem, because if there's a wall and there's Starbucks on this side and Radio Shack on the other side, it's very difficult to differentiate between the two, because there's only a wall dividing the two contexts, right? So I started thinking, how can you actually separate these two? And everywhere I would go, I would think, how can you tell this is a coffee shop or this is a Radio Shack? So one day I was at this coffee shop and it was smelling coffee real good. And I said, wow, if only there was a smell sensor on the phone, I could tell I was in a coffee shop, right? And that kind of gave me a thought, well, we don't have a smell sensor, but the phone has other kinds of sensors, and if you can actually use that, and the ambience has a lot of information about that place, the way you walk around actually tells what kind of a place it is, the kind of colors in the environment tell what kind of a place it is. So I actually tried to put all those sensor information, gather those sensor information on the phone, and actually try to create a fingerprint of the ambience. And that's what it looks like. If you go to Starbucks, you sense the ambience and you create a fingerprint. You go to Pizza Hut, you sense the ambience, you create a different fingerprint. And I was trying to say that the fingerprints of these ambiences are different, and that could be a hint to localization. I was really, really excited about the paper. And I submitted it to MobiSys 2009, and it got rejected. And believe it or not, I actually felt like this. I went through the 5 stages of grief. First, I was denial. This email must have been wrong. This email was intended for someone else. Then I felt anger. I talked to the program manager and I said, how come? And then finally, I accepted that the paper has holes in it. And then I actually stayed back in the lab, took all the students, added a lot more evaluation, did a lot of more studies, plugged the holes, submitted to MobiCom 2009, and that got accepted. And I was like, yes, finally I made it. At that point, I actually got another lucky break. Some fantastic students had already joined me. G and Yunath were already working with me. Shovik and Justin actually joined. And I also had a fantastic collaborator, Srihari, who also joined forces. And we started working together, and they were on fire. I mean, we would be working till 2 a.m. every night. We would have parties. We owned the entire building after 6 p.m. We had test beds. We were doing parties with wearing wearable cameras. It was real fun. We were actually going picnics. We were eating out, and we were even doing go-karting. And I still tell Justin, you still did not beat me. He could not beat me at that go-karting, even though he promised he would. We forgot about papers. We forgot about authorships, CVs. We were just having a lot of fun. And that felt really, really good at that time as an assistant professor. Around that time, software radios also started coming in, and that felt like a translator of equations to code. I'm a computer science guy. I do not innovate in communications or signal processing or an antenna, but software radios made it seem like the equations, I could see it in code and I could understand, and my students could understand too. So we started listing all the assumptions in wireless, thinking, hey, why don't we challenge them? So he said, it's not possible to transmit and listen at the same time. That's an assumption made that's a statement in a book, in a wireless networking book. Backoff is unavoidable for distributed channel access. Slot sizes are lower bounded by propagation delay. These seem like the axioms of wireless networking. But then we said, look, if we have software radios, maybe it's possible to do something. And what we started looking at is this thing called CSMACN, where we said the transmitter, if it had two antennas, it could transmit a signal, and when the receiver sees that the signal is corrupt, it could send a knack saying that, hey, stop transmission, abort, because there's no point sending the rest of the transmission because I'm not going to receive it correctly anyway. And if the transmitter has a second antenna, I could do self-interference cancellation and I could pull out the ACK. The paper was in Hotnets 2000 and we were torn apart. Lots of people said, there's no way this can work. ADC will saturate, dynamic range, you cannot do that much of cancellation. There was lots and lots of criticism and fist fights, almost. Okay? But then Kannan actually made a fantastic job out of it, did the full Duplay paper, published it in MobiCom, and there's a great research that really I credit them for actually doing, except that I wish this paper was a little bit more cited, but that's a different thing. We also did rate selection, where we said, look, if you actually had physical layer information about how much the EVM or the error vector magnitude of the symbol was, you could actually do precise, provable optimal rate selection. And I'm not going to go into the details of this, where we said that the modulation does not depend on the channel. The dispersion that the symbol sees, it is regardless of the channel. And we actually built the system on top of this and showed that you can provably select the best rate as long as the coherence time of the channel stays for a few packets. We submitted that paper to NSDI 2010, and that got accepted. But the moment I got that acceptance, there was the last line in that acceptance email that says, your shepherd is Hari Balakrishnan. And in the paper, we had said, soft rate, which was Hari's paper in Sitcom, which was a fantastic paper. We said, we are better than soft rate. I said, oh man, Hari is going to really, really give me a hard time. Hari did give me a hard time, okay? He was really meticulous about saying where the contribution is, what is overclaiming, what is underclaiming. But at the end of the day, I really thought he was extremely objective and he had made the paper much better than what we had submitted it to be. And it was a great experience to actually work with him for several weeks, and he worked very closely. Tenure happened. And I really felt really, really relieved, and I could sleep much better. But then, once I got tenure, things kind of took a turn. And like many other professors who actually, after tenure, they kind of start introspecting. They take a hard look in the mirror and they start asking questions. At least I started asking the question, you know, what's really great research? What am I doing? Is this worthwhile? Is this important? And as I kind of started thinking about that, I had the time now, and I felt that I was always searching under the searchlight all this time. There's this story where this drunkard actually lost his key, this drunken guy lost his key, and he was actually looking under the street light to actually find where he had dropped his key. Clearly, he has dropped his key in the dark, but when someone asked him, hey, why are you looking over here? He said, well, this is where I can see. And I resonated that greatly. I felt something was missing. And then I took the time to actually look at people outside my research area, right? Kamesh Munagala was a guy in algorithms in Duke. He published in Soda and Stock and Fox. I looked at David Smith, who does metamaterials, and he was designing an invisibility cloak where you have an object and you paint that object with a particular material, and then the object becomes invisible because light goes around that object, right? Because the refractive index of the object becomes negative. And his applications were, we are going to paint all the big hotels in Florida with this paint, so that the hotels which are not close to the beach can now see the beach despite the fact that there are other big buildings in front of him. Simply because light would go around it and people deep inside the city would still be able to see the beach because he was playing with light and there were applications to MIMO and all kinds of stuff. One of my friends from undergrad who had become a molecular biologist joined UT Southwestern as a postdoc under a Nobel laureate, and he started telling me things that sounded very different from what I was doing actually. And then I looked up this person, Martin Wederle, who does signal processing in EPFL, and his work was also very, very different. And as I started talking to people, right, I started seeing that there's some bifurcation in the way people think. There was one class of people that were saying, what's fundamental? What is science? What are you proving that's going to survive the test of time? Can you tell precisely what's hard? What's the challenging part over here? And this other class was, what's creative? What's novel? Is this going to be useful? Is the industry going to adopt this? Is this going to work? Are you solving artificial problems, or are you solving real problems that we can take all the way? Is this feasible? Is this thorough? Right? And I kind of started wondering. I wanted to do good research, and I kept getting these different kinds of blame games and different kinds of thoughts, where one community said, building is activity, not fundamental science. And the other community in response says, waste of taxpayers' money. You're the jewelry in our department, right? Show me the result, right? And I kind of felt I was in this community. I liked building things, right? And I didn't worry about the lower part. I liked theory as well. I just couldn't do it, but I liked it well. But I started thinking, what does fundamental mean? And I actually spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I kind of almost devised my own thinking around it. What I did was I said, okay, let me take research that are clearly fundamental, right? No one had any doubts or any debates about this. So I took these very, very core algorithms, Viterbi's algorithm that's used in hidden Markov models, Kumar's capacity result, RSA public key cryptography, and I started actually revisiting them and looking them, what is fundamental about this? I wanted to catch that fundamentalness, right? And then as I looked at Viterbi's algorithm, I kind of broke it apart, and then I said, look, the key result comes from this mathematical result which says, and we don't need to get into the details, but it says if there are product of functions f and g, and you want to maximize the product, you can actually decouple it, where you can actually maximize GAB for B first, and then you can maximize FA for A, and that's the same. And that's a mathematical result that existed. And Viterbi very cleverly used that result in actually developing the most likely sequence in your hidden states, and that made it beautiful, right? And it was fundamental, right? I looked at Kumar's paper, and if you look at the proof, there's a Jensen's inequality which actually makes the key jump in making the proofs possible. RSA's public key cryptography has this result from number theory, where there's a clever combination of mods. E to the power A mod B is equal to, I forget the result. But all of this were taking existing results in mathematics, interestingly putting them together, and making this new algorithm, which was absolutely beautiful, and others could use them. And I said, every time I went to the PC, people would say, oh, this is not fundamental systems research. People are putting things together. I said, they're putting things together too. What's the difference, right? I struggled with that a lot. And then over time, I kind of designed this thought that, research in applied sciences, CS, ECE to be relevant, cannot be fundamental, or all of them are fundamental, right? In both theory and systems, the beauty lies in really recursive composition. It's the glue, it's how you make these things come together is where the beauty is. It's just that other communities don't see at the scale at which you're operating, right? Pure mathematicians say, oh, those are applied mathematics, they're just applications. Applied mathematicians say the same thing to electrical engineers, they say the same thing to computer science says that to HCI says that to psychology. It's a level of abstraction that keeps going, but fundamentally I felt they were all building blocks. They're all Lego blocks that get kind of put together, and the glue, the idea, the cleverness in really how you put it together. And this is actually the winner of the Lego block competition that created this structure. Well, what's fundamental? It's like Lego blocks all at the base level. And I really felt good looking at this. He said, no way, this is beautiful, fundamental or not, I want to do this. So with this theory that I developed, I talked to a lot of people. A lot of systems people agreed. Some theory people still did not, right? Some theory people said, look, bringing problems out of your pocket and solving them is not research. It has to be unsolved for many years to be considered great research, right? I said, well, internet was not there, so you don't consider internet as a research problem. There was no answer to that question, right? People said putting things together is activity, not science. I said, system people put things together, you've given the mobile phone to you. People said it's the intellectual barrier to entry that defines science. I just did not get that. Why should the hardness of it define contribution? But I said, fine, I'll agree to disagree, and I moved on. But one day I was having a very animated discussion with Ashu and Nitin. And Nitin is someone I've seen who actually straddles both theory and systems, although he does more theory these days, but he has an appreciation for systems, I believe. And he actually quoted Potter Stewart, who is a Supreme Court justice, and I think many of you know the story. It seems there was this case in which the Supreme Court justice was given a movie and was asked, is this movie pornography or not? Is this obscene enough that we are going to ban this movie? And there were a lot of debates on what is obscene, right? Lots of art films had enough amount of stuff that would be called obscene. Sometimes other movies was not that much. And then he actually said this, I shall not today attempt to further define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that of shorthand descriptions of hardcore pornography. And perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it. And this motion picture involved in this case is not that, right? I know it when I see it turned out to be the catchphrase here. Maybe there's no way to say what is fundamental. You just see it and you feel this is fantastic. And it's really the glue that you're appreciating, and in some other cases, it's not. And I said, okay, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. I would take this and I'd move on. And I had clarity and I had peace. And I said, okay, fine. But as I kind of soul searched more, right, I realized that, whether it's fundamental or not, that's not the most relevant question. What I realized I was doing, the mistake I was doing, right, was that I was actually too busy in getting the papers out, getting my students' job, getting to come up with cool, exciting things. What I was not doing was committing myself and saying, this is the problem I'm going to solve, this is the problem I'm going to dedicate my next 5 years, right? And that was the missing part. That was the hole that was left behind. So what I started doing is I started thinking of who am I really, right? Because that would answer this question, where do I want to be? What do I want to solve? And then the first decision process seemed to be, do I want impact? Do I want to do systems that would actually build and touch? Or do I want provable things that may or may not have impact, but the elegance and the beauty is really what I care about, right? And at some point I came to a conclusion that I am indeed towards this side of the tree. I do want impact, I do want to touch lives, even though that means doing the engineering, doing the debugging, doing the hardcore coding. It's fine, right? There's a price to be paid and I'm willing to pay the price. But then I thought, okay, now I have clarity and I should be able to start working on something, right? But then unfortunately, I believe there's another decision that you have to make, which is probably the hardest one. From the ping pong lesson, from the ping pong loss, right, I had learned that putting your eggs in one basket is what really matters, and I think that gives you direction. And then I started thinking, what is the problem that I'm going to work on, right? I mean, there seem to be many baskets, and all I was doing all these days was really diversifying my portfolio, putting eggs in multiple baskets, and I was doing localization, I was doing augmented reality, I was doing vibrations, I was doing all kinds of stuff. And interestingly, I realized that a lot of theory people have the same problem, right? They also had multiple baskets in which they had to put things, and they were also thinking, where do I put my eggs? Because they wanted some problem that would give them intellectual nourishment for a long term, and I wanted a problem that would actually translate to reality, and there were uncertainties in both these camps, right? So actually over time I saw these two fields have similarities in them that just they don't realize, right? Or there could be a new area that you could think of, right? And that's where you actually put your eggs. And believe me, I don't have an answer to where, if you ask me where did you put your eggs, I don't have an answer, I'm still thinking, But one of the things that have gotten me interested in recent times is neuroscience. I've started thinking that the brain, I mean, there's a lot of good research happening in the brain sciences if you look around. And I started taking some courses and reading some papers, and it's fantastic. There's lots of the brain that's undiscovered, things that we ourselves don't know, the unknown unknowns actually reside in your brain. And I started thinking, could we leverage that? You know, the way we designed technology is actually through some high-level abstractions of what humans want or what humans can do. You want throughput, you want latency, you want the video to download fast, but those seem very coarse-grained abstractions of what human beings are. And I started thinking, are there deeper understandings of humans that would actually inform the design of technology? So I just want to say one quick, very little idea that I've been playing with. So recently we worked on this problem of vibrations, where you can make a smartphone's vibromotor vibrate and make a radio out of it. So what we have is a phone vibrates, and you can encode bits in that vibration. When you touch another phone which has an accelerometer, the accelerometer can act as the receiver, and if you touch the vibrating phone on the accelerometer phone can actually pull out, at this point, 20 kbps of information. So we're trying to design a vibratory radio. But that's besides the point. What I've been getting excited about neuroscience is what I want to start thinking about is the watch is the first thing that actually touches your skin. And I'm starting to think, can I make people wear watches? And if a message comes to your smartwatch, can the message vibrate that your tactile senses in the brain can automatically read the message, whether you having to look at the message? And you don't read it, your tactile senses that is connected to your cognitive capabilities in the brain know that my wife says get milk, right? So, or know that you are sending me a message to stop right now, right? I don't have to look at my watch. And we started doing some experiments, and there's some interesting avenues over here. Please don't think that this is a mature result. This is very, very premature. But what I want to say is, this seems like something that I feel it's a longer term thing, feels like worth solving to me, and I'm kind of trying to think if I want to put my eggs in that basket. To finish off, I think I've kind of come to this conclusion that researchers are defined by the max, not the mean. And all this while I was kind of going for the mean, not the max. And P.R. Kumar actually says this very nicely. He's the one who mentioned this. It's important to become a true expert in one thing, as opposed to a kind of a rounded player, a person who does many things, jack of all trades, because that one thing gives staying power on the long haul. In the short haul, I feel playing many shots reasonably well does not take me anywhere. And I feel when you know one thing well, really do it well, it helps you, it guides you in putting your eggs in one basket, as opposed to always kind of hedging and not being sure where you want to go. Thanks much for listening in. I just want to thank my rock band, all the students in arbitrary order, and all the collaborators that I've worked with. Thank you very much for paying attention.